good to be here today, and I'm just so excited that he woke me up one more time this morning. And I'm going to give all the glory to him. And the reason being is because he deserves it. My hallelujah belongs to you. My hallelujah belongs to you. My hallelujah belongs. Hallelujah belongs to you. Hallelujah. You deserve for 90 years belongs to you. Yes, all of the glory belongs to you. Oh, you deserve it. You deserve it. You deserve it. You Yes, you. All you gotta do is ask him, y'all. Oh, do it. I guarantee you. Yeah, he'll do it. He'll do it. I'm telling you, all you gotta do is build your hopes on things eternal. You better hold on. When you think he's not coming, I swear. He's coming, y'all. He's coming. He might not come when you want him, and he won't be
No, before I forget it, I want to make a comment. Listening on last Sunday morning, and as I was listening to Reverend Paul, I was just touched by his remarks. I thought to myself, you know, one thing about Reverend Paul, I don't know what that lesson was the day that he heard, but it reminded me of the parable of the sower and the seed. The seed fell on good ground, and that seed took root. And today we see what it grew into. Because, you know, Reverend Paul would come and he would drop Reverend Lisa and the children off, but he didn't come into church, so I really didn't know him. But the day that he did come in, he has never stopped coming. So I want to acknowledge him. That's Paul. Dr. Ernest Holmes in The Science of Mind says this. He says, a single stream of thought daily sent out in creative mind will do wonders. And you know, up until today, Reverend Lisa has been sharing with you the history of our church, from the place it began and its movement. And you know, as she identified 3 of the original ministers of the church, and one of those 3, Dr. Charles Palmer, was a giant in the religious science movement. Believe it or not, he was the teacher of many of the giants that we recognize today, including Dr. Richelieu. Came to LA Third Church, and where he was taught by Dr. Palmer. And you imagine all those that were then thereafter taught by Dr. Richelieu. And you can see just what fell out of Los Angeles Third Church and continues to do so. So I don't want to go back and to rehash and unwind all of that Reverend Lisa has already shared with you. What I'd like to do is to take us back to the time where I entered into the history of this institution. You know, that single stream of thought that Dr. Holmes was referencing was something that I was employing, you know, long before I visited LA Third Church. Right after I had completed all of my coursework in divine science and in religious science, I had a wonderful study group called Spiritual Innovations. And we were meeting every Sunday at the Ramada Hotel up in Culver City. And one day I just had an epiphany and I said to myself, you know, this is not about theory, and that's what we do. We talk about theory every single Sunday morning to those who come, but it means nothing unless we become practitioners of that which we speak of. And since we are speaking of living principles, it's about demonstrating what it is that we talk about rather than just talk. See, each of us can do that. We can all tell the story, but the story means nothing unless the story brought forth some manifested good. So I had committed within myself that I would not go into another pulpit. I would not talk about the principles of science of mind or anything else until such time that I had absolutely demonstrated those principles to my own satisfaction. I didn't want to be one of those teachers who graduated from one of our schools and then ran up into our churches and talked about something that they never experienced, which happens to so many. And you know, and in my mind, I was hearing the words of the prophet Malachi, where he said, "Prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts. And if you prove me, then I will open up the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing that there's not room enough to receive." That became my quest, to prove and to demonstrate these divine principles. So I was working at that time for a construction firm, and I decided that, you know, I no longer wanted to be someone else's employee. I wanted to own my own business and to carve my own way in life. And so at that moment, you know, I was one of the students of Sharkey Grain who taught all about visualization and creating these charts and that whole thing. And I began to get involved in all of that and that whole creative process. And I had an affirmation that I spoke every day into the ether until such time that affirmation unfolded, and that was the creation of my business. So here I am now, a business person, enjoying what I was doing, moving forward, enjoying myself, going down to the Redondo Beach Church, listening to Dr. Rich Lou every Sunday morning, leaving the church, going out and doing the same things that everyone else do. Time, let me just back up a little bit. The church had gone through all kinds of disruption. The minister before me was one by the name of Lee Gomez. And something had happened that caused him to absolutely to rip the church apart. So many of the members had just left. They had gone to June Cobb's, they had gone to Guidance, they had gone to Triangular. But they had left LA Third. It was just a handful of folk that were remaining there, dedicated practitioners who were not going to go anyplace. They were determined that they were going to stay there. And they stayed, and they treated, and they treated, and they treated that a new minister would come to that church. So when I agreed to speak that next Sunday, which was Easter Sunday morning, I spoke that Sunday morning. And obviously it was a wonderful lesson. It was just a spirit-filled moment. And I had invited a bunch of friends of mine to join me this time, to come and to be a part of that experience. And I had shared nothing with anyone of what I had heard, what I had felt, and how Milton had came to me and what it was that he had said to me. I just said, I'm going to be speaking at LA Third at 48th in Maine. If you're not doing anything, come out and to be a part of the service. And they came. And after the service, so many of them said, oh, Dr. Ronnie, this is, I just feel you in this church. This is where you need to be. And I didn't say anything. I was non-committal. I just smiled and said it was a wonderful service. Well, before I got out the door, the board stopped me and they asked, could you come back next Sunday? I had no plan, so I came back the following Sunday. And then after that service, they asked, can you come back the next Sunday? And I did. And then they asked me to come back again, and I said, well, I have a commitment. So one night I got a call at home, and it was from one of the members of the board, and they said, you know, we are considering people to be our new minister. We'd like to know if you would consider. And I said that I would. And so they said, our board is going to be meeting, and we will get back to you. So I said, okay. Now, at this time, this group, they were still holding out hopes that Reverend O.C. was going to become their minister, even after he had already told them that his car would not take him to that east side of town. But they were still holding out hope. Then they asked Reverend J.L. He had no interest. He called me and he said they had called him and asked him about his interest. He said, I have no interest. I'm going to pursue the ministerial program over at First AME. He said, so I'm not interested in taking on that responsibility. I said, okay. So when they called me and they said the board would like to make an offer to you, I acted surprised. Like, me? So I went in and I met with them and we discussed provisions. We discussed exactly what it was that they would want me to do and what it is that I was willing to do. And I told them I was willing to come on board as the minister, but there was just one major provision that I was unyielding on. And they said, what is that? I said, you cannot have any say-so in the ecclesiastical worship of the service. See, all of my life, I've been led by the Spirit. And at this point in my life, I was not allowing someone else to dictate to me how I was to be led. The Bible said, to as many as are led by the Spirit, to them gave he the power to become the sons of God, and if the sons of God joint heir with Jesus Christ. And that's something that I learned at a very early age and continue to acknowledge and allow that to be my guiding light. That I need to be able to allow myself to receive the inspiration of Spirit and then share that inspiration as it comes to me. And they said, okay, they did not have a problem with that. So I joined, got to work, and invited a whole host of my friends to come and be a part of LA Third Church. And they did. They came out, and some of them have gone on. One is still here today in the audience. But we got started because we had to do something to preserve the building. When I said that it was a minute away from collapse, I was not exaggerating, folks. This building needed repair in the worst way. The church had no money because they had accused the former minister of taking all the money. And that's what broke it up. So we began a whole host of fundraising events just to raise money so that we could build up that church. Someone sitting here in the very back of the church today, Carrie Elam, organized sidewalk sales every Saturday of every week to raise money so that we could do what it was that we needed to do. They sold dinners. They donated their time. Another friend who had joined our church and joined our board of trustees, Raul Fiscander. He was the lead architect on the Walt Disney project in Japan. He began to do the design of the church and then coordinated all the construction with the subcontractors. to do the work so that that sanctuary would look like a sanctuary and a place where people could come in and to feel comfortable. And there was just so many seniors at that time at the church. Therefore, what we had to do was take one of the bathrooms and convert it into a full handicap restroom. So the individuals, regardless of their challenges, would be, whether they were in a wheelchair or not, would be able to maneuver in and out of that restroom and in and back into the sanctuary. And that's the work that we committed to do, and that's the work that we did. And that's what we did with so many individuals over there. And you've heard the stories, that's saying that there was just a handful of people. See, it don't take an awful lot, but what it takes is commitment. And somewhere along the line, I don't know if that sort of transitioned with those early saints or not. But folks, it takes commitment in order to make things happen. You see, we can come to church every Sunday and sit there and hear the lessons and go home and do nothing but come again the next Sunday and repeat, and it just becomes a cycle. Or we can sit there and we can absorb something. We can hear something that resonates with the spirit within us. And when we hear it and begin to act upon it, we open the windows to allow blessings to come pouring out into our circumstance. And I say to everyone, today, if you are still living in want, it's because you are living in doubt and disbelief. Because what we live is our belief in the things that we hold dear. The church sort of changed its name from being a church of religious science to being a spiritual center. And today, me personally, I find that to be the biggest joke in the world. Because you can claim to be spiritual all day long, but that does not make you spiritual. It's living that makes you what it is that you claim. So we got started and we fixed the church up and had a beautiful sanctuary. And we had not the greatest musical department in the world, but we had a very committed musical department. We had this little musician. When I came to the church, I believe he was at least 85 years old, but dedicated and committed. See, we so often talk about LA Third Church being one of the oldest African-American churches in the religious science movement, but it was a multicultural church. It had in its original heyday just as many Caucasians there as members as it did African-Americans. And when you read the historical archives about the church, as written by Dr. Marilyn Leo, you will see and hear some of the stories of the people that were there. A lot of you may have heard of Reverend Rainbow out of Texas. Rainbow used to be the musical director at LA Third Church. That's how she got started. But we had this little music director, his name was Frank, committed. He drove in from Glendale every Sunday morning. And I made it a point to always be the first one to open up the church, and I was the last one to lock up the church. But every morning I got there, he and his wife would be sitting outside in their car, waiting, sitting there waiting. And so I'd open up, we go in, and we got started. As a matter of fact, Linda Alvarez was our very first soloist at this church. She was the one of those who came in when I came in and brought her musical mastery with her. She had just returned from a tour of The Wiz, coming back in from Chicago, and asked her to come in to be a part of this experience. And she did gladly, and sang here for a whole host of years. So I said, one of the things that's necessary for a minister is that we have some inspiration before we get up. If the music ain't right, it's going to throw us off. And it would throw me off in particular because, as I said to you, I came from a foundation of music. You know, long before I came to the Church of Religious Science, I was a member of the Church of God in Christ. And we enjoyed great gospel music every single Sunday morning. And that's what I was accustomed to. And to go from that to this, it was like, I need some help. But I did what I was teaching everyone else to do, and that is that there, as Dr. Ernest Holmes said, there is a power in the universe that you can use. It does us no good if we don't tap into it. To talk about it does not help. But the moment that we make connection with it and allow it to make connection with us, things begin to happen. So I began to go into prayer treatment that our musical department expand. So I called on another dear friend of mine who was a practitioner, and I asked her to be in agreement with me. So I'm going to speak this word that the right musician is led to our church. Someone that will assist us in our growth and unfoldment. Because it said, in order for us to attract folk to come back into this church, which was on the east side of town, everyone else was heading west, we got to have something that's going to draw. And nothing draws folk into a church initially like it's music. Folk hear the music, that's the first introduction they have to the church. And if the music is wrong, then something is going to be wrong because they're going to be sitting there with a twisted mind. But if the music is right, they're going to relax, they're going to be open and receptive. And therefore, when the word comes forward, they're going to receive that word, and that word is going to empower their growth. So the same practitioner that I was asking to come into agreement with, she called me one day and she says, Dr. Ronnie, I got someone for you. And I said, who's that? She says, a young man by the name of Ron Bishop. I said, really? She said, yes. She said, I have his number for you. And I said, okay. She gave me his number and I called him and I set up a time for him to come and to meet me at the church to audition. Ron came in and he got on the piano and he made that piano sing. And I said, yeah, this is what I need. This is exactly what I need. So afterwards we were talking and I asked him what was his salary requirements. And so he told me what it was that he would require for a weekly salary. And I took that to heart and I thanked him. When he told me that, I said, God, I said, they can barely pay me. And what they're giving me is more of an offering than it is a payment. But I wasn't seeking a payment because the word that I had previously spoken had manifested it, and it had caused something to grow, and that growth was providing me with my income. I was out now doing God's work. So I went to our board and I said, I've met this young man and I want to hire him. His music is just what we need in the church, and so forth and so on. And so they said, well, how much is he going to want to be paid? And I told them, and I said, but here's what we're going to do. Instead of paying me, you pay him, because that's something we absolutely cannot live without. Pay him and mine, it will come. So we brought in Ron, and all of a sudden, something that was a secret for so long, and that is a church on the east side of town, all of a sudden it became known all the way across town. And all of a sudden, folk began to come and to be a part of our experience. Well, we were having wonderful church service. We had built the church up, but we were being constantly bombarded with vandals and graffiti. Each and every week, if you come to the building, you wouldn't recognize it. It was so much graffiti on the exterior. And this was something different for me because, you know, I grew up in a time where you reverenced churches. You didn't destroy them. And I said, what kind of mindset is this that folk just want to just destroy a church? And then they were breaking in. And so who breaks into a church? And we trying to figure out how they got in, and we couldn't figure that out because everything was locked. So we thought. So one day I hired a security guard and asked him just to sit outside in a car, cross the street, and watch what went on and report back to me. And so the next day he came to my office and he said, "I've found out what's happening." I said, "What?" He said, "You have this little window." It was a little stained window near the entry doors to the church. Little window, not something you would think about somebody getting in to come in to rob the church. He said that the Hispanics in that area had come by and they would put a child through the window. And then he would open the door because, the doors had the push bars. So once you push the bar, the doors open. And they would come in and they would, take the dishes and the cups and the silverware and, because at this time at the church and the women that were there, they were really old school. They didn't believe in paper plates and paper cups. They wanted real stuff, and that's what they had in the kitchen, real stuff. And it was being stolen. So I said to the church, I said, God is trying to tell us something. Once upon a time in the 1930s, in the 1940s, in the 1950s, when this was the West Side for a progressive ministry, that has long changed. And that's why all your progressive ministries now are on the west side of town. I said, there is a paradigm shift that's here. And there is a new group of folk who are taking over this side of town. Our thing is to let them have this and go elsewhere. So what we did was we spoke the word that there was someone else that was looking for a church and that they would come and use our church. We weren't selling it, we were leasing it. We were not getting rid of our real estate, we were leasing it. Because our plan was to use the additional income that we were going to generate from the lease, pair that with our current offerings, and be able to pay for someplace else that we were going to go to. So we ended up, because we wanted to get out of there right away, at the University Hilton Hotel over across from USC. And they gave us a ballroom in the lower level of the building to the north of the hotel structure. And that's where we were having service. Ron would come in with his keyboard, and he would set up. All we had to do was plug in the mics into their PA sound system, and we had sound. And they would set up the podium, and we bring in everything else. Now, it didn't allow for us to do much other than to hold service, but we weren't dealing with graffiti. We weren't repairing vandals and break-ins into the church. And so it gave us some comfort. One day I was sitting there just as the start of service, and I was watching some of the seniors as they were coming in. Now, there was no elevator access to the area where we were located. Everyone had to come down the stairs. And they were these big wide stairs. But as I was watching the seniors one day, I was noticing their difficulty in manning those stairs. I said, we can't stay here. There's got to be another place. So I said, let us go back once again in prayer and visioning and ask to be led, guided, and directed to another place. We knew that that move was going to be temporary. And so said, let's search out and seek. One day, I was talking with Tyree Hunter. And Tyree and I belonged to a group called Corridor Economic Development Corporation. It was a group that was created by, at that time, Senator Diane Watson. And we were creating affordable housing in this area. And so Tyree and I were standing on the corner and we were talking. And as we were talking, I looked across the street. I said, Tyree, that building there is for lease. 43, 47, 11th Avenue. It was a building to itself. Didn't have a whole lot of parking. It was right next to the pizza place across the street here. Said, there's a sign out there. Let me call this landlord and see what we'll be able to do. Called the landlord, set up a meeting with him, met him over there, negotiated a lease amount, and then I went back and I brought that to the church, and everyone was happy. We were going to come out of the hotel. I said, now we just can't go into this building right away because it kind of needs some help as well. The church that was there previously, I don't know what they did to the Department of Water and Power, but they had them so upset that they disconnected the entire water service to the structure. So the owner was telling me that the minister's daughter had ran off with the money and they were unable to pay their bills. And so I said to him, I said, I don't know which face I'm wearing today that you think that I believe that craziness. I said, but I'm looking at this building, it doesn't look like somebody ran off with the money, it looked like they had any money. And it doesn't look like you took any time to repair your own property. Now, any repairs that we do to the structure, I want that to be credited to our lease. And he agreed. So we're not going to come in here and fix up your property for someone else to come in and enjoy. So that was that. And so each time that it came for the lease renewal, I'd have my list ready because I knew he was going to try and jack up the price. And I said, these are all the things that we have done. I want credit for all of them. And so it would be a pull and a tug, but we've reached some agreement. So we stay there, but the whole time we never stopped our fundraising because our goal and our quest was once again to find our own building. And we wanted to be here in the Leimert Park community. This was an artist community, and we wanted to be in that community. So that was our first foray in here by being there on 11th Avenue. And we've had many, many wonderful, wonderful events there. But by the time we got to 11th Avenue, those old original saints began to transition. And one by one, they began to leave and go on to the next level of their journey. And in each instance, I said to our congregation, I said, for everyone that leaves, let's know that two are coming in their place. And did that not happen? Every time one went home, two more would come in the door. And they come in from a whole variety of places. And we had all kinds of fundraising events. So I said, okay, after we had began to increase our building fund, and the Spirit led me to create a financial thermostat, if you will. And we had sort of a goal at the top, and it would show them where we were in terms of our results. And we kept raising the thermostat bar as we continued to raise money. And all this time, I'm looking at everything in this community. You know, at that time, there were a couple of banks that were here that had closed up, Wells Fargo being one of the ones that were right there on the corner of Crenshaw and I think it's 43rd. And went in and we looked at that, and there were several other places, and we tried to negotiate with people, and oftentimes we came in just a little too late because someone else had gotten the property, and I said, well, that one wasn't for us. So this time the class is going on, and at this point we're into our ministerial class, and both Reverend Lisa and Reverend Paul are in that ministerial class at this moment. And so we had the ministerial class and prayer treatment. I'm in prayer treatment, and outside partners, individuals who are at all the other churches that we had some affiliation with. Finally, a good friend and practitioner from Agape called me one day, And he said, Dr. Ronnie, I found the building and it's available and it's still available. And I said, really? I said, I've looked all over this place. It must not have a sign up. He said, does not. And I said, where is it? He said, 4323 Lamert. I said, really? So I drove by and I said, oh, okay. I said, I'd like to see the inside of it. So he called the owner and he set up an appointment. And I came in and I looked at it. And when I came in the building was once upon a time, back in its heyday, a beauty salon. And they made hair products in here. It was a hair product manufacturing place and hair dye and all that other stuff. And they had in the floor all the infrastructure for those standalone hair dryers and things, and the sinks and all that was in here. And it was sort of, that wall there was more over here because there was a little church that was holding a service in here. Just a very small church, and everything else on that side was part of that whole manufacturing process. So I came in, I looked around, and once again, Spirit said, this is it. So I made an offer. The owner accepted the offer. I went back to our church. I told them we had made an offer. And then we put in the application for our financing. After we made the offer, we closed escrow on this building in 10 days. In 10 days. How many churches close escrows? Forget churches. How many individuals close escrows that quickly? What could have been other than the hand of God? It had gone before us, blessing our pathway. We were walking in the light. So I said to the class one night, our ministerial class, I said, I'd like for us to do something. Instead of meeting in class tonight, this building that's over here on Lamert, I want us to get up and we're going to act just like Joshua did with the tribe and walk around the building. And we're going to walk around that structure 10 times. And we're going to take it just like he took Jericho. And on that 10th time, we're going to proclaim in a loud voice that this is ours. In the story, the bringing down the walls of Jericho, as they walked around that 10th time, they shouted in a loud voice, and all the walls came down. So in this instance, if there's anything that will be held against us, it won't stand. Because we're going to speak something in this moment and watch Spirit deliver. So we did that. And we closed the property. So then we come into the building. The money that we had collected, we put it all on our down payment because we wanted not to have a huge note. So we put 50% down on this property. And so we came in and we looked around and there was a whole lot of work to be done. So I said, okay, Spirit didn't bring us this far to leave us. A lot of those saints, the names of the individuals that we called out, when they walked into the structure, they came to me and they said, Dr. Ronnie, I'll give 5,000. Dr. Ronnie, I'll give 6,000. Dr. Ronnie, I'll give 3,000. Didn't have to beg, didn't have to auction anything, but folk were coming forth and making commitments. And then on top of that, fortunately, we had contractors who had joined the church as well. And therefore, this pulpit that I'm standing on, they built. The moving of that wall to where it is today, they did that. The plumbing that's in these restrooms in here, they did it. And all the drywall, everything else, and they did it all at cost. The only thing we paid for was materials. I remember this, the Saturday before we moved in here, we were in here scrubbing and cleaning, and even Reverend Lisa was in here on her knees. Getting ready for that wonderful Sunday morning service. And that first Sunday morning service we had in this building, oh, I tell you, it was a grand one. It was a service to behold. Ron had put together a musical program that was one for the ages. The ministers, the practitioners, everyone was just so joyful as we came in for our dedication Sunday morning. This church, from its origin, from someone's living room on the east side of town, an idea. Someone sitting one day in the Wiltern Theater and listening to the words of Dr. Ernest Holmes, saying that there's a power for good in the universe. Imagine that message resonating so much that this person believed that he could take that message back to that part of town and share that. And folk would come and to be a part of it. Not only come and be a part of it, but they would grow and excel and expand because, like I said, this is a living teaching. That the more we absorb it, the better we are. And throughout the years, each Sunday morning, as I would stand before the congregation and to give a lesson, Spirit was giving one to me. And the same principles that I was giving to everyone else, I was taking those same principles and using them myself, applying them into my business, applying them into dealing with folk that came for counseling, assisting individuals, some that never even came to be a member of the church, but yet they were contributing because they believed in what it was that we are doing. Even Tyree Hunter was not a member of our congregation at that time. She was a member of guidance. But she was so committed herself to what it was that we were doing that Tyree made it a point of sending to this church $1,000 every single month. And she was not even here. That was a commitment. So it was her and individuals like her that did that. So each time I would tell them, I'm about to go and to speak at another church. Before I could get out the door, someone would say, Dr. Ronnie, are you leaving us? I said, no, I'm not leaving you. Spirit has some more seeds to be planted. And therefore, it's sending me out on this journey. Remember the Sunday morning, I think it was sometime in 2007, 2008, that I went over to the City of Angels. And I spoke there, 2 services. And after the first service, when I came down from the podium to the floor, and there was a woman there, Mrs. Maxwell, I think that was her name, grabbed me. Could you become our minister? And I said, sweetheart, I have a church, and they're waiting for me to come back over there. So, so no, I can't become your minister, but I enjoyed being here. But it was so wonderful because even prior to me going there were members of City of Angels that were visiting us on a regular basis. The one I remember that came the longest was Elaine Pounds. Years before I went over there, she was visiting us over here on 11th Avenue, coming in periodically and enjoying our worship service. And then, after appearing over there, the saints that were without a minister all of a sudden followed the light here to Lamert, and they began to make the beacon grow brighter. You recall, prior to my retirement, we were busting at the seams in here. And we're having 2 services and almost needing to go to a third. That was the growth of our church. That was the unfoldment of our church. That is the history of our church, to the point where all of you have entered in and became a part of this loving, living experience. This place was sought out. We found it. You sought us out. You found us. Now, after finding us, what are we going to do? You know, for roughly 3 years, we've been impacted by a pandemic. And for so long, the church was empty because of the need for social distancing. And we went to the Zoom to have service. And now we're gradually coming back. As we come back, church, it's now time for us to start all over again. To start our building all over again. Become visionaries of where we're going to go from here. Someone else brought you to this moment. Now, it's up to you to take it to the next place, the next location, the next moment. Things are changing here. You know, when we first came, there was an abundance of parking. Now that no longer exists. But that's progress. Things are always going to unfold. You don't go into an area and be a piece of concrete, and that is be there forever. Everything is for a season. This was for a season. We came in and we enjoyed and continue to do so. But where do we go from here? But it's all up to you. Every Sunday morning that you are sitting here and you're listening to Reverend Lisa, Reverend Gerald, Reverend Paul, Reverend Amon, and others, seeds are being thrown out. What do you do with those seeds? See, your heart is a place of planting. Something needs to fall in there that you are going to nourish and give it growth, an idea. But see, you have to believe, one, that you are able. Two, you have to understand the thing I share with you so often, that right where you are, God is. And the moment that that becomes so locked into your consciousness, that right where you are, God is, then you'll understand that you have all the power, all the glory, all the presence that you will ever need. You know, an affirmation that I give you so often to say to yourself, that you are the glory of God made manifest as you. God called you one day by your name and reminded you that you are filled with the essence of its glory. And now you are now able to go forward and create a greater experience for yourself. And something happens when you create that greater experience for yourself. Some of the runoff comes into your church. So 90 years is just a start. Where are we going to be 90 years from now? Imagine 90 years from now, when the saints come in and they have their libation and begin to recognize the ancestors that are us. What will they say about us? And what will they say about what it is that we left for their charge? Love and blessings to you this morning. Yeah.
for you.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.